The Iran war continues to reshape global oil markets, a vote that could end 16 years of authoritarian rule in Europe, a new NCAA basketball champion, the Masters, the NFL draft, and the Federal Reserve deciding America's interest rate fate. Here's what we're looking out for this April. On the economic front, April opens with a critical run of data. On April 3rd, the Bureau of Labor Statistics releases the monthly jobs report, which is the first major signal of how the economy is holding up. That is followed on April 10 by the Consumer Price Index, the CPI, which is the most direct read on inflation. Right now, key inflation measures are still running above the Federal Reserve's 2% target, leaving them less room to lower interest rates. Mid-month brings the federal tax deadline on April 15. Around the same time, the IMF and the World Bank hold their spring meetings in Washington, D.C. to forecast world economic growth. To close out the month, we get a quick 1-2 punch of data. The Federal Reserve meets on April 28 and 29 to set U.S. interest rates, followed immediately by the advanced GDP estimate on April 30. That GDP number will tell us right away if the recent economic slowdown is deepening or reversing. In politics, November's midterm elections in the US are accelerating here at home. Republicans currently hold the House of Representatives by just a 6-seat margin. April's candidate filing deadlines and early polling numbers will start defining which races are actually competitive this fall, setting the stage for the battle for control of Congress. April 15 isn't just tax day, it's also the critical Q1 fundraising deadline for federal campaigns. Those early financial reports will reveal which vulnerable incumbents are struggling and which challengers are building the war chest they'll need to compete as the primary election season officially kicks into high gear. Meanwhile, lawmakers in Washington return from their spring recess to tackle spending bills and legislative slowdowns ahead of the summer. Across the street, the U.S. Supreme Court will hold its final session of oral arguments starting in late April, bringing several high-stakes blockbuster rulings one step closer to reality. Overseas, 2 elections on April 12 carry significant international weight. In Hungary, Prime Minister Viktor Orbán is facing the toughest challenge of his 16-year rule. A victory for the opposition TISA party would swing Hungary from a Russia-aligned government to a pro-EU position. On the same day, general elections in Peru will determine whether the country can find political stability after cycling through numerous presidents. On the global stage, the US-Israel war with Iran enters its second month and remains the story running underneath everything else. The conflict in the Strait of Hormuz continues to be a critical flashpoint for roughly 1/5 of the world's daily oil supply, keeping energy markets on edge all month. A planned summit between President Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping remains a major wildcard. If the two leaders officially meet in April, the agenda will cover trade tariffs, Taiwan, and the Middle East, potentially producing a significant trade announcement that could move global markets overnight. Meanwhile, US-brokered peace talks between Russia and Ukraine face a critical window, with Russia preparing for a spring offensive and a US-imposed June deadline for a deal. April will test whether diplomacy can gain any real traction or if negotiations will stay deadlocked. In sports, a wild March Madness tournament wraps up with the men's Final Four on April 4 and the national championship on April 6. The final showdowns will take place at Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis, crowning a new champion after a season full of upsets. The Masters runs April 9 through 12 at Augusta National. Defending champion Rory McIlroy returns to Georgia to defend the green jacket against the best golfers in the world, fresh off his historic career Grand Slam last year. The NBA play-in tournament begins April 14, followed by the full NBA playoffs opening on April 18. Then, on April 23 through 25, Pittsburgh hosts the NFL Draft with Round 1 airing Thursday night on ESPN. In culture news, April 22nd is Earth Day, observed globally under the 2026 theme Our Power, Our Planet. With global conflicts heavily spotlighting the world's dependence on concentrated oil choke points, this year's Earth Day carries sharper energy policy relevance than most. And since we are National Today, we are also tracking some of the internet's favorite unofficial holidays. April Fool's Day kicks off the month with its usual brand of corporate pranks and shenanigans, and April 11 brings National Pet Day, which is always a massive driver of social media engagement across platforms like Instagram and TikTok. And finally, we're watching in April 4 major stories that could dominate headlines with very little notice. A sudden shift in the Iran war, whether a major escalation or a confirmed ceasefire, will immediately move global oil markets and dictate the news cycle. A confirmed Trump-Xi summit could produce a surprise trade deal, while a sudden breakthrough or total collapse in Ukraine peace talks could upend the European security map before summer. And lastly, the Hungarian election on April 12, we're watching it closely as a potential flashpoint. If Prime Minister Viktor Orbán loses his grip on power after 16 years, it will be the biggest European political story of the year. And that is your April 2026 news preview. For National Today News, I'm Ben Kaplan.